This is going to be about Pharisees, but they're Bible believers. Because I believe that there's a lot of Pharisaical ways and things that Bible believers do, and they don't even realize it. I have been a big Pharisee, especially in the past, especially when I first got saved. It's like you're just so immature and a baby Christian that you just automatically are a Pharisee for a while, it seems like, for most people. I mean, every now and then you see somebody that's not that way. But it's like, I remember being such a judge of people. I remember being the biggest hypocrite ever. I would judge people for stuff. Maybe didn't really say it to their face or anything, but I would judge people for things. And then I would go and do this. I went and did the same thing myself later on. And let's just be honest with ourselves. Let's quit pretending. Let's quit acting like we're this big shot all the time. Let's quit acting like we're just this great spiritual giant, because we're not. The only thing good about us is the Lord Jesus Christ. That's the only thing good about me. My flesh is no good. And the Pharisee loves to show off the flesh. But I'm going to jump right into some characteristics of Pharisees and show how we, and notice I said we, because I'm including myself in this. I've been a Pharisee. Just like Paul admitted. He said, I lived a Pharisee. You know, he admitted he was the biggest Pharisee ever before he was saved. And most likely, the thing that, just like me and you, the thing that you struggle with before you're saved, a lot of times you still struggle with that after you're saved. And I wouldn't doubt it if Paul still struggled with Pharisaical stuff after he got saved. And I just think we need to quit pretending, and we need to examine ourselves. I feel like the Bible believers are, they get so much knowledge, and they just get so puffed up in it, and they just lose touch with reality completely, and they start thinking that they're just so good and that everybody else is on this lower level, and that if somebody doesn't believe the same, or you got all these other Christians out there, like, think about this. Bible believers are a great minority. Like, there's just not many compared to all the other people who are saved too. And how egotistical, how big of an egomaniac do you have to be to think that you're right and all these other people are just so wrong and just backslid and just apostates and all this stuff? But do you know a mark of a Pharisee is that they think that their generation is the best? Think about that for a minute. Do you ever think that your generation is the best and you constantly throw off on an older generation or a younger generation? Well, the Pharisees was no different. In Matthew 23:29-30, the Lord says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites." I am a big hypocrite. I am. I have been one. Some people are more of a hypocrite than others, but when it comes right down to it, if you admit it, you are a hypocrite. I've been a hypocrite. He says, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous and say, notice what they say. The Pharisees said this, look, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Look at that. The Pharisees really thought if they could go back to the old days and live when the fathers did, they wouldn't have killed the prophets. Yet, what did they do? They killed the prophet of prophets. They killed the prophet like unto Moses. I think that they did worse. Yet they thought that they were better than that previous generation. You know, you may think that your generation is really good, and you may look down on you hear this all the time, especially with the older generation constantly throwing off on that younger generation all the time. I hear it every day. And I'm not that young anymore, but I'm not quite as old as the people that usually do this. So I'm kind of in the middle. I feel like I can talk about it a little bit because I'm not biased for the younger. I'm not biased for the older. But I do see that a lot. I see that instead of advice, instead of being caring and kind and things like that, they just throw off on them. Back in my day, we did it like this. Back in my day, we did that. My generation's so much tougher. You're weak. You're a sissy. things like that. Constantly you hear that. In Matthew 12:39, it says, "But he answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign." He called that generation that thought they were so good an evil and adulterous generation. Just admit it. Your generation is not good. It's evil. Generation X is evil. Baby boomers are evil. I'm a millennial. It's evil. Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we're all a big mess. Why would we brag about our generation? It's all pretty bad. They're all bad. Sure, some of them may have their strengths and things like that. Don't let your generation that you're a part of make you feel superior to anyone else, because you are not superior to anybody. And in Matthew 23:33, he called them a generation of vipers. He said, "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers." You know, there's just, with Bible believers, so much I hear them tooting their own horn constantly. And it's like, my wife told me this story about her grandma, how when she was growing up, she would just always just be laying down on the horn. When she would come pick her up, she'd just lay down on the horn really hard every time she would come, or just lay down on the horn all the time, until one day it broke and the horn didn't work anymore. And that's the way Bible believers are, except with their mouth. They're constantly tooting their own horn. They're going to break that thing. They toot it so much. And it's like she doesn't blow the horn as much in her old age. I know she doesn't. Every now and then I hear her blow the horn. And it's like maybe her old age toned her down some. I think as Christians, the more you grow in the Lord, you should realize the more you grow in the Lord that you're not nothing special. Quit tooting your own horn. I mean, I use the example all the time. Paul said at first that he's the least of the apostles. Then he said, "I'm the least of all saints." Then he said, "I'm the chief of sinners." I mean, he wasn't thinking more and more highly of himself as time went on. He was thinking less and less of himself. He said, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death?" You know, how often do you hear Bible believers say that? Unless it's kind of like a false humility thing. Then the next second, they're just bragging on themselves. Look at me. Look what I did. Taking pictures of it. Showing everybody. Telling everybody. The Bible says in Proverbs 27:2, "Let another man praise thee, and not thine own mouth, a stranger, and not thine own lips." That's a rough verse for some people, because they are constantly praising themselves. I do believe it is good to give honor to people. I believe it's good to compliment people and esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. But don't feel like you have to do that for yourself. Let another man praise thee. In 1 Corinthians 1:31 it says, "He that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord." 2 Corinthians 10:17, "But he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord." Just give it up already with the constantly bragging, trying to tell everybody how great you are. You're not that great. You're no worse than any other Christian, but you're not that great. You know, obviously an older man has a lot of wisdom to offer a younger guy, but you're spending all your time bashing the kid instead of imparting the wisdom that you got. You're spending all your time trying to show you still have your physical strength, when your strength should be more the gray head, your wisdom. You know, Proverbs 20:29, "The glory of young men is their strength. The beauty of old men is the gray head." You know, some older Bible believers, I've heard they don't really, when it comes to the younger generation, they're not really trying to teach them nothing. They just put them down. Tell him how inferior he is. Tell him how things were back in his day. And, you know, now this type of talk, when, like at work, I use work as an illustration. You know, I work with older guys, and the type of talk like that about how if they're saying, you know, they're tougher, their generation is better, things like that, that talk, for me personally, made me want to do better personally. But that type of talk from the older guy made me want to do better from an aspect of my own sinful pride. It was because I wanted to be better to outdo that guy. And, you know, I remember thinking, well, I'll show this guy. And then I wish, after I would try my best to show him up, and if I showed him up, I would think, well, I wish I could go back in time and show him up as his younger self too. I want to show his younger self up too. That way he has nothing to say to me. And all that is, that's stupid. That's just my own sinful pride, being full of pride, wanting to be better than him. And that's what that type of talk produces. When you're just constantly putting the younger guy down and you're not really giving him any advice about how to be a better person, you're just throwing off on him. If it does make him want to do better, he's doing better for the reason of to prove you wrong, to show you up. And, I've found a good portion of the time that the quietest guy in the room usually outperforms the loudest guy in the room. I've found that the loudest guy in the room isn't the most deadly guy in the room. It's the quietest guy in the room. He doesn't need to run his mouth all the time. You see these people that are constantly just running their mouth, talking about how great they are. I know right then and there, this guy ain't that great. And if he is, then if there are some guys that run their mouth all the time, and they do back it up. But I would think a lot more highly of you if you just did it and just shut up about it. Because, and a lot of, obviously, these people, I'm talking about Bible believers. So, and if it's an old Bible believer, they do have a lot of wisdom. They do have a lot of great truths and great things to say. But my goodness, you got to peel and dig through all their pukey, snotty, egotistical stuff to get to the truth. Like, it's like reading something from them or hearing them teach or preach. It's like you got snot falling on you, puke falling on you, and then you can finally get to the truth. Just give the truth and shut up with bragging on yourself. Shut up with putting everybody down all the time. This has been weighing on me for a long time to do this lesson, because I'm just so sick and tired of hearing somebody brag on themselves all the time. Just shut up and say the truth and hope that it helps this person. We don't need to hear how great you are. In Psalm 18:25, it says, with the merciful, thou wilt show thyself merciful. With an upright man, thou wilt show thyself upright. With the merciful, thou wilt show thyself merciful. The way a lot of Bible believers talk, it's no mercy. When they're talking about the younger generation, it's no mercy. Their generation is the greatest in their eyes. And they talk about these young kids like they're nothing. It's like, I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I hear them talk, I'm thinking, maybe they don't have kids. Maybe they don't know what it's like to have a kid. I mean, when I had kids, it changed a lot for me. It changed my perspective on things. So when you're working with a young guy, even though my kids aren't even that old yet, my son is just 6, not even 6 yet. And I think, when I'm working with a young guy and he's got some problems or he's just not doing what he ought to do, I'm not thinking, well, this is a piece of trash. This younger generation is a piece of trash. When I see that young kid, I think about my kid. I think about my son. And I think about how would I want an older guy to treat my son when he gets out in the workplace? That's the way you ought to think. The Bible does say, rebuke not an elder, but it does say treat the younger men as brethren too. You forget about that because you get so puffed up in your older age. It's like you get this entitled, puffed up outlook of things, thinking that you're better or that somebody owes you something because you've lived longer. And people should treat you with honor and respect if you're older. But at the same time, have some humility about yourself. Notice now. Think of a person, a Bible believer that constantly tooting their own horn, constantly putting people down. It's completely contrary to how the Bible says. No matter how much they tell you that this is the right way to talk, it's not the right way to talk. Listen clearly if you're following these people. That is not the right way to talk to people. I don't care what they say, and it's like you hear. Ruckman, he's got kind of a bad rap. They say that he always, was kind of rude and crude and put people down, call people names. I never saw that. I've listened to pretty much all of the audios that you can buy on the bookstore. I've listened to all of them. And, if you listen to him in those classroom studies where he's teaching verse by verse, and he's got all these young guys asking him questions and even, kind of challenging him in a way or trying to say that he's wrong or something, He's always nice about it, always gracious with it. I don't think I ever heard him, be mean or get offended or be puffed up in any way in that sense. It was only when he was talking about, the Bible correctors in his books, or when he was talking about the Bible correctors while he was preaching or something, then he would get a little rough, maybe a little nasty with them, call them a name or something. And I think that's a good balance, personally. Now, that's not my personality to get rough towards anybody, but that was his personality, and it was a good balance. Probably that was a lot more better balance than what I've got. But that lines up with the Lord and how he was gentle with the average sinner on the street. But then these religious Pharisees, he would be calling them, "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers." But what I've realized over the years of reading and being and listening to preaching and for like the past 15 years or so, which obviously not as long as you older guys, I know that's nothing. You think that's nothing, I know. But from what I've seen is a lot of Bible believers, they adopt how Ruckman talked to the Bible correctors, harsh and rough, and they will talk like that to everybody. Anytime they talk with that tone of voice like a jerk, and it does not come off as manly. Nobody's impressed with it. The only people who are impressed with that talk is yourself and other people who are self-righteous like you are, and who look up to you and want to be that because you're giving them the impression that's being a man. So therefore, they think, well, to be a man, I got to talk like a jerk all the time. That's not the way you're supposed to talk. To most people, you need to be nice, and it's like Bible correctors. Not Bible correctors, but Bible believers. A lot of them, they're under the impression that you got to be negative all the time. They see that Ruckman has a bad attitude, Baptist blowout, and it's like they're under the impression that he thinks you should have a bad attitude. You should not have a bad attitude. It's wicked. Listen, you're wicked if you go around treating people like they're nothing and talking down to them and acting like a jerk all the time. That's evil. And you are doing more harm than good. You're not this tough Bible believer taking a stand. You're just a jerk. And it's the way that you talk and the way that you act towards people many times is very the opposite of way Paul said. Look at these verses. You say you're a big-time Bible believer and you got all this knowledge. Why can't you do this simple stuff? In Titus 2, verse 2, look what he says about the aged men. That the aged men be sober, grave, temperate, sound in faith, in charity, in patience. You don't show no charity and you don't show no patience. You're a big grump, a big grouch, a big Scrooge all the time. It says, the aged women likewise, that they be in behavior as becometh holiness, not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things. Look at this, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. Now look at this. Young men likewise exhort to be sober-minded. So the aged men, the aged women, they got to teach the young men. They got to teach the young women. Not saying your generation is terrible. I hate this generation. They're lazy. They're good for nothing. How's that helping them? Teach them something. Quit bragging about your generation. Teach the younger generation. It says in Titus 2:7, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, and doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity. Look at this. Sound speech that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you. The way y'all are talking a lot of times is not sound speech that cannot be condemned. It's ugly, filthy, pukey speech that can be condemned. And when I hear it and I read it, it makes me sick and it makes God sick. And you think that you got it all figured out. I don't know if it's because you've been doing it a long time and you're older and you do have some great truth in there, but you turn everybody off before they can even get to the truth. Now, I'll dig right through it. I'll dig right through the puke and the slime, and I'll stick with you, and I'll try to get the truth and take it. But most people are not, especially not a younger guy, especially not a young guy that's not even been saved long or may not even be saved. He's not sticking around for that. He'll use it as if he's not saved, he'll just use it as an excuse to go to hell. But most of the advice from older Bible believers that I hear is from a root of pride. And for that reason, it is speech that can be condemned, not sound speech that cannot be condemned. You know, Paul says in Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. That verse peels the hide off of a lot of Bible believers today, because everything that they do is through strife. It's just strife coming out of their mouth and vainglory. They do not have lowliness of mind. Their brain, their head is huge. And it's like they don't need, that hole in their face is not a mouth. It's just a hole where their ego just spews. It's very disgusting. And there's a lot of talk about how the young men, they're no longer men. I've heard and seen Bible believers. I've seen this recently. He was saying these young guys, they wear panties, they wear their mama's bra, and they're saying all this stuff, and I'm thinking, well, does that sound like sound speech that cannot be condemned? Does that sound like an aged man that's got all this sound wisdom that's been in the Bible forever? It sounds like a very bitter person, a very bitter, angry person that's upset with how their life how their life ended up. And I know how it feels, because I struggle with bitterness. I struggle with anger. But it's not everybody else's fault that my life didn't end up how I wanted it to end up. And I'm just so tired of hearing it all the time, especially if you follow Bible believers online, you listen to preaching online. This is the junk you hear. Just this stupid junk. These supposed aged men Bible believers throwing off on everybody, talking about people like they're nothing, and trying to make you feel like this is how a man is supposed to talk, when that's not how a man is supposed to talk. That's completely opposite. Then when somebody gets upset about it, they say, "Well, that generation is just too easily offended. They're too sensitive." What you're saying is like kind of fighting words in a way. I mean, you go up to say somebody to that on the street, they're probably just gonna. I wouldn't doubt it if a young guy today just doesn't hit you or something. But because I mean, you're saying all these smart aleck stupid comments that are just annoying, and then you're saying that they're too offended and they're too sensitive. That's crazy. You don't talk like an aged man at all. The only people that are impressed with it is people that are like you. You talk like a washed up has-been, a guy who's trying to hold on to some type of glory that he used to have. But what does Paul say? Galatians 6:14, but God forbid that I should glory save in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. You know, sometimes your older age can make you prideful and entitled. You need to use your younger age, your older age, and the truth that you've accumulated, and you have a lot of truth. You do have more smarts and truth than younger guy. So just put out the truth and shut up with all the fluff. And you know, sometimes you're under the impression that you can't learn from someone who's much younger than you. But what did David say? Psalm 119, 99 and 100. I have more understanding than all my teachers. For thy testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients, because I keep thy precepts. A young man can teach you something. And, you know, 2 Timothy 2:24, and the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle unto all men, apt to teach, patient. You're brainwashed into thinking that words like gentle, mercy, patience, love, kindness, tenderness, you're brainwashed into thinking that those words aren't for you, that's mushy, that's not being a man. No, that's what Paul says a man should be. All in James, he says the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated. You're not easy to be entreated. People are afraid to ask you a question because they're afraid you're going to mock them. I've had, when I was a younger Christian, I would ask a lot of older Bible-believing pastors that were 50, 60, 70. They would snap at me and get mad at me just for asking a question. These weren't questions to like question their doctrine. It was just honest questions. They would snap at me. They were not easy to be entreated. They were jerks. And I still listened to them, took the truth that they could give me. And it's like the Lord said about the Pharisees, do not as they do as they say do. Because they're hypocrites, so they're not even doing what they say do. And I learned that at work. I read that verse, and I was at work, and there was this guy. He was always doing stuff he wasn't supposed to do, but then he was always telling me what I need to do. And I would get so mad, I would think to myself, well, what a hypocrite. And then I was reminded of that verse, because what he was telling me to do was the right thing. So it's like, even though he's a hypocrite, I still should have did what he said. So I started just doing what he said, because what he's telling me to do was the right thing. Because the truth is the truth, no matter who says it, even if it's a hypocrite that says it. But, you say, well, Jesus called people names. Jesus got rough. Yeah, with the religious Pharisees, the people that kind of act like you. That's why you need a little rough talk. And, you say that the younger generation's so easily offended, so sensitive. If you've stuck around, you're so mad right now, you can't stand it. You're ready to kill me. You're so mad. And I learned that too by watching that younger generation and the older generation at work. And I'm kind of in the middle, and I don't stick up for, I don't take sides of one or the other, but I see it. They accuse the younger generation of being too sensitive, too easily offended. But you let a young guy say something to them, they won't talk to them for 2 weeks. They're so mad. Everybody's easily offended. Everybody's getting mad when somebody says something to them. It's not just them. But, there's a lot of good that can come from admitting that you got problems, I've got problems. Admit how weak you are. Admit that you need God every second of every day. There's nothing good about you except for the Lord Jesus Christ. And how can I take credit for any of it? For any good thing that I do, it's because if I did something good, it's because I allowed God to do that through me. And just there's a lot of power in admitting you're weak, because then God can even use you more. And it's like, even the greatest decision you made, getting saved, you had to admit, hey, I'm a sinner. I'm without strength. I need God. I need the Lord Jesus Christ. Paul called himself in 2 Corinthians 12:11. He says, though I be nothing. He said, for in nothing am I behind the very chiefest apostles, though I be nothing. And if Paul was nothing, obviously we are too. Galatians 6:3, for if a man think himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceiveth himself. You are deceived. You're all the time going around saying everybody's deceived, everybody's apostate, everybody's this, everybody's that. You're deceived because you think that you're something when you're nothing. And just admit it. Just admit it. I'll go ahead and tell you now, there's nothing good about me at all. Like, I very rarely see myself as this big, great man. I'm a male. I'm biologically a male. I never think that I'm some great man, or that I'm just this macho type of guy. I'm a whopping 5'4". When I enter into a room, it's kind of the baby elephant in the room. Somebody's got to say Frodo or midget or something like that anytime I enter into a room. And I mean, I don't care. I've been little since preschool, so and I'll even laugh at the short jokes if it's original and it's funny. I'm just telling you, there's a lot of power in it, in admitting you're weak, admitting your weakness. I can't really do anything. I've struggled through my entire life because I'm very unequipped for life. I didn't have my parents growing up. I grew up with my grandparents. They were older when I began to live with them when I was a baby. And, I never had a dad to teach me anything. And, I'm not saying that's an excuse not to learn anything. I'm just saying, when I grew up, it was pretty much just me. I'd go outside, play outside, kept to myself. I never learned anything. So by the time I got to an adult, the only reason that I made it is because when I was 21, I got saved. And the Lord just pretty much held me up until I got saved, and He's continued to hold me up because I literally don't know how to do anything. I can't do anything. I've struggled to fix my lawnmower. Somehow, I've fixed it when it's tore up, but sometimes I just put my head on it and pray. When it's not working, then somehow it just starts. I can't fix anything. I can't do anything. I'm, by definition of what a lot of people call a man, I'm a big sissy. And really, if you admit it, you are a big sissy too. Quit bragging about how much of a man you are. It doesn't impress anybody. It really doesn't. You're just impressing yourself with all that junk. And just admit you're weak. Admit you need God. Admit that there's nothing good about you. If Paul said, "Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death?" Why would we brag about how good this flesh is? I think you're struck on yourself. You think you've got it all figured out. And I'm sure you're a good man. I'm sure you're a hardworking man. I'm sure you've been through some stuff. And there's stuff that you do that is impressive, that's great and everything. But your mouth is filth. You may not even cuss, but your ego and your mouth is just filthy. And the thing about the Pharisees, what do they want to do? They want to broadcast their works before men. Matthew 23:5, but all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries. They enlarge the borders of their garments. Their phylacteries, they'd put those little leather boxes on their foreheads with little scriptures inside. Make them, people think that they're more spiritual and whatnot. It's like you don't have to go around and publish all the things that you do for God. You can keep it to yourself. You get more rewards for it. Sometimes I think, does these people even want rewards? Are they trying to get their rewards down here? Do they want rewards in heaven? Because it's like they'll do something great for God, and it is courageous, and it is bold, and I admire it. But then they just broadcast it. And, any strength that I have to perform good at work, God gave me the strength to do it. Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18. And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is He that giveth thee power to get wealth. Why would I think I'm some type of great physical specimen for what I'm doing? The Lord gave me the power to do it. And it's like, it just blows my mind that some men, they walk around like they're this great physical specimen. Listen, there's 20 million guys on this planet that could smack you in the face and you just fall over. Like, yeah, you're tougher than somebody physically. You're stronger than somebody physically. But what about the 50 million guys over here that could beat you up? Since those 50 million guys can beat you up or outwork you, does that mean you're not a man? Being a man is not about how strong and stuff you are. You being older, you would think you would have realized that. No matter who I outdo or what I do, God gave me the power to do it. And, God's not wanting me to do anything to show that I'm outdoing anybody anyway. And that's what a lot of Bible believers do. They're trying to outdo someone. It's what it seems like. God could have made me Mephibosheth. You may be a warrior, but He could have made you Naaman, the leper warrior. He can give you a thorn in the flesh to keep you from getting exalted above measure, just like He did Paul. And, some of you are tough. And it's like, I see some Bible believers, they go through hell on earth sometimes, and they still come out. They still come out talking like a big egomaniac. But All I'm saying is, you got to quit glorying in yourself. That's just like a Pharisee. Colossians 3:23, whatsoever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not unto men. 1 Corinthians 1:31, that according as it is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. 2 Corinthians 10:17, but he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. You know, what's it going on in your mind to make you think that this type of bragging all the time is biblical? Did you know that a Pharisee has more mercy? He's so puffed up in his knowledge and his trying to defend himself and his beliefs that he will have more mercy on an animal than on a person that conflicts with his religious beliefs. It's like I see the way some Bible-believing pastors talk about how another Christian believes, or this other pastor over here believes, and they talk about that guy as if he's less than an animal. And the Pharisees, they cared more about an animal than somebody that conflicted with their beliefs. In Matthew 12:11 and 12, it says, and he said unto them, what man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. They were all the time getting on to the Lord because he was healing people on the Sabbath day, like the guy at the pool of Bethesda. And he said, arise, take up thy bed and walk. And they were mad because he healed a guy on the Sabbath day, a guy that had this infirmity for 38 years, and they were mad about it. Yet if their sheep falls into a pit on the Sabbath, they'll lift him right out. But since the Lord was conflicting with their belief about a certain day, and that guy about carrying his bed was conflicting with their belief by carrying his bed, they hated them, and they would have cared more about an animal than them. And I've seen Bible believers that are like that. If you've got their arch nemesis pastor trapped in a hot car on a summer day, they would be less upset about that than a dog in a hot car on a summer day. If they saw a little kitty cat or a dog in the car on a summer day, they'd bust that window and love on that thing, let that thing lick them all up and down their face. But if their arch nemesis pastor was in that car burning and dying, like maybe he was passed out in it, they'd be like, well, that's what he gets. That's a heretic. He's sending people to hell. Oh my goodness. Do you hear yourself? Do you hear yourself? You have no mercy. And it's like, do you realize that people that conflict with your beliefs, that person is a person. They have a soul. You should have some compassion with them. I know that's another word that you tough macho men Bible believers don't like, is compassion, even though that's in the Bible. The Lord's moved with compassion on people, not little kitty cats. The Lord's moved with, he had compassion on people. Jude said, and some making a difference. Compassion. He said compassion. But it says in Luke 13:15-16, the Lord then answered him and said, thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall and lead him away to watering? Ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? They didn't care nothing about that woman who had been that way for 18 years, but they cared about their ox and their ass. Well, their ox or their ass can't confront them or they can't conflict with them about their doctrinal beliefs. So they don't have no problem with them. The Bible-believing Pharisee, he has no problem with the people that don't challenge him or conflict with his beliefs. He has no respect for them. And you can tell by how he talks to them. He doesn't really have no respect for them. He looks down on them. But the moment you go against something he says, then you're going to see the fangs. The Bible-believing Pharisee is so puffed up in his knowledge that anyone who disagrees with some of his favorite doctrines is worthless to him, and they'll speak about that person like they're scum, like they're just the dirt on his shoe. I heard this one so-called Bible-believing pastor refer to one of his arch enemy pastors, and he said something like, "I wouldn't blank in his blank if his guts was on fire." And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. He literally said, you know the saying. I'm not even going to say it. He literally said that about that person. Well, let me inform you that, most likely he probably said, well, he's an unsaved heretic because he disagreed with him. But it was a saved guy, and that guy's in the same body as you. Just because somebody has different beliefs than you, if they've believed on the Lord Jesus Christ, he is a member of the same body as you. But the Pharisee, he's just so puffed up with his own knowledge. The Pharisee, he frames, another thing they do is they frame how good someone is by outward performance. It's all about the outward performance, what they see you doing, and comparing themselves among themselves. Are you doing as much as they're doing? Are you doing the same kind of things that they're doing? And things like that. And another thing is they're envious. They're so envious. And the Pharisees they were just eat up with envy. That's why they delivered the Lord to be crucified. It says, for he knew that for envy they had delivered them. The chief priests and the Pharisees, the big-time religious guys, Matthew 27:18, they were so envious. And the Bible believer, they're just so envious. They preach Christ of envy and strife. That's why they do it. It's all to make themselves, to feel a certain way about themselves, make them look better. That's all they're trying to do is make their image look good. And it's just all about envy. It's just like any pastor, you could say that pastor's name, and it's like 9 out of 10 times they got something negative to say about him. They just hate the person. And we all. I'm guilty of saying negative things about other people. I'm guilty of saying negative things about a certain pastor or something. And it's natural. You're going to have disagreements. But it's like you talk about them so much, you outright hate the person. And it's like, and I noticed that they really hate the ones that seem to be successful. Like if it's a successful pastor, they really hate them, and they get very envious about it. Something I noticed is a lot of Bible believers that I hear or listen to on here constantly talking or bashing Robert Breaker and Gene Kim. And obviously because in the Bible believing circles, that's the most successful ones probably ever. Almost 1 million subscribers, and they say, well, since they got almost 1 million subscribers, then it's just automatically evil. That's not necessarily true. And they'll get into how Robert Breaker and Gene Kim are monetized, that they make money off YouTube. And whatever you believe on that that's your own personal conviction on that. But they'll bash them so much because that they're monetized. So they'll say that they're only in it for money. I don't think that those people are only in it for money. And it's funny to me how it's like the people who are really money hungry, they talk about money more than everybody else. I've listened to my fair share of Breaker and Kim. I don't ever hear them talk about money. I don't think they're in it for money at all. And it's like I think this it's complete hypocrisy with Bible believers, because there's tons of them. I'm not just talking about one person. There's tons of them. I hear them talking about people like Breaker and Kim because they're monetized. They say they're only in it for the money. But think about this. It's free to watch everything that they put out. It's free. You could go right now and watch Gene Kim, and you could watch Robert Breaker and guys like those guys, Charles Lawson, all them type of guys that are very successful and everybody knows them. And you could go watch them and listen to them right now for free. Any of them. And you can give it out to people for free. There's nobody, what do they call it, gatekeeping it that I know of. Like if I downloaded all of Gene Kim's stuff and went and gave it out to people, gave it out to everybody at work, I'm not going to get a call from Gene Kim's posse or mafia or secretary and telling me that I got a lawsuit or something. He's probably going to be glad I did it. You know, one time Danny Castle said this great quote. He said, you know, a lot of preachers sell their sermons. He said, I would pay somebody to listen to me preach. And that saying always stuck with me. I mean, they're putting all this stuff out there for free for everybody to listen to. That doesn't come off to me as money hungry. I don't know how the monetization works or whatever, but I'm pretty sure that the money that they get is just from people seeing a 30-second ad before their video that you can skip the ad. I mean, it ain't like the 90s when I was a kid and you had to sit through 3 minutes of commercials. You know, you can skip the ad and then you watch the sermon for free. It didn't cost you anything. It's hypocrisy. I said all that to say this. It's hypocrisy because, now don't twist my words on this because I'm going to explain further. It's hypocrisy because they will defend Ruckman and the Bible Baptist bookstore, even though none of that's free. You have to pay what I believe. This is my opinion, and I can have my opinion just like you always have yours. Outrageous prices, and I'm someone that spent thousands on the bookstore over the years. I've spent thousands. I have several Ruckman reference Bibles that I've bought. I've went to the bookstore and bought. I think some of the prices are outrageous. But you know what? That's their decision. It's not a sin. I don't believe it's a sin for their prices to be outrageous. If they want to charge $70 for a digital copy of a verse by verse of something, that's their stuff. They have every right to. I'm not against it at all. But what I am against, and it's complete hypocrisy, you'll defend that and you'll gatekeep that. You'll police that. But then Robert Breaker and Gene Kim are money hungry, even though you don't have to pay anything to listen to it. And whether or not you believe that monetization is right or wrong, you're a hypocrite for saying that it's bad for them to make money off of that, but it's okay for the bookstore to make money off of preaching and teaching. That's hypocrisy, and the Bible says, Paul said himself, they that preach the gospel should live of the gospel. I don't see any problem with any of it. If they want to charge for it, they should be able to charge for it. That's their stuff. If Robert Breaker and Gene Kim want to monetize their channel, they should be able to monetize their channel, and that's just the truth of it. You need to quit thinking so highly of yourself. What it all comes down to is these people are full of envy, and I'm always skeptical of people that are always talking about other people getting money or what other people are doing with their money. That's between them and God, what they're doing with the money. The people that talk about money the most are usually the ones that love it. But did you know that a Pharisee thinks highly of himself because of what line he came from? You know, John the Baptist was having to say to him, he said, and think not to say within yourselves, we have Abraham to our father, for God is able of these stones to raise up children unto Abraham. They thought that they were so good because they were of the line of Abraham. And Bible believers are like that. They think that if they got saved under somebody like Ruckman, or they think that if they got saved and shortly after started listening to Ruckman and learned all these great Bible truths, that they're just something special. And if they knew Ruckman, they'll let you know about it. I knew him. You didn't even know him. It's the Bible-believing movement. They think that they're so wise and that they're so mature. It's the most carnal bunch of junk on the planet. It's just as carnal and worldly as anything else. The Bible-believing movement today is no better than the Corinthian church. I am of Apollos. I am of Cephas. I am of Christ. It's a big nasty mess a lot of times, and I'm not don't twist my words. See, you're already trying to twist my words. And that's what Pharisees do. What did they want to do to the Lord? Throw the woman taking an adultery down at his feet, that they might have opportunity to accuse him. They wanted to entangle him in his speech. And, Ruckman made me love the Bible. When I was a new Christian, I got a hold of Ruckman stuff. It made me love the Bible. He taught me so much stuff. I have nothing against him. I'm against how a lot of his followers act. It's pathetic. And and I was like this at one time myself, I guess. I mean, there was a time, probably for the first 10 years of studying the Bible and stuff, I thought that 99.9999999% of what Ruckman said in those commentaries was infallible. Like, I saw it right under the King James Bible. That's how highly I thought of it. And you can get to where you think a little too highly of somebody, even if it's a great person. And the Bible does say, give double honor to them that labor in the word of doctrine, and I do. I recommend Ruckman to people all the time, and he's a great teacher. He's a great man. But how much honor? So far, I feel like I've probably made a certain crowd of people mad. Now the rest of this is probably going to make another different crowd of people mad. And I'm not trying to be mean, not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm not one of those people that says, I don't care to make you mad. I don't care to hurt your feelings. I hate hearing people say that, because I do care. I don't want to make you mad. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. And if you think that that's feminine or unmasculine, so be it. I have no intentions of making people mad or hurting anybody's feelings, but here's some other characteristics of Pharisees, and I don't know that I've ever really said this out loud to anybody, but I always viewed this as a Pharisaical thing, and I think it's a very odd thing, the way a lot of Bible believers are about clothing. And now when I say Bible believer, a lot of you think of just like the Ruckman crowd. But when I say Bible believer, I'm speaking much more broader than that. Like, I would even say the Fundy crowd would be Bible believers. I mean, most of them aren't just getting up and correcting the Bible or something. Well, even though they don't believe necessarily like me, doesn't make them not a Bible believer. And I've listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of preaching over the years, like, depending on how long the sermons are, 5 to 8 sermons a day, of all different types. And something that I hear consistently from a certain crowd of preachers out there is all about this big emphasis on clothing. And I always thought that was odd, because that's what the Pharisees did. They loved to walk in long robes. They made broad their phylacteries, as we talked about. They enlarged the borders of their garments. Those borders are fringes or whatever, like they're little tassels on their garments. Like they get it from back there in like Numbers 15, 38 through 39. And those fringes or whatever, they would make the fringes bigger than normal just to show off. Show everybody how spiritual they was. The Lord said they loved to walk in those long robes. He said in Luke 20:46, beware of the scribes which desire to walk in long robes and love greetings in the markets. And they just love to be recognized for their clothing. They thought it made them stand out as these big religious people, spiritual people. And I've never really been exposed to any of this. It's not like this where I go to church, and pretty much none of this that I'm saying do I experience at my church. This is all stuff of what I just hear from listening to preaching and over the years. This is a kind of a big thing of the way people act. It's very Pharisaical, and it's like this huge emphasis on clothes, to where they treat people a certain way if they come to church with a certain type of clothes on. And you know, what does James say? If you look over in the book of James, in James 2:3, actually James 2:1, it says, "My brethren, have not the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with respect of persons." And the reason I'm even mentioning this topic about clothing, not so much about the clothing, because it's not a big deal, not that big of a deal as the other stuff we've been talking about. The big deal is it's about the respect of persons thing. And he says in James 2:2, "For there come unto your assembly a man with a gold ring and goodly apparel, and there come in also a poor man in vile raiment. And ye have respect to him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit thou here in a good place, and say to the poor, Stand thou there, or sit here in my footstool. Are ye not then partial in yourselves, and are become judges of evil thoughts?" So it's like they have a respect of persons. They think somebody's more spiritual. They think somebody's better because they wear a certain type of clothing. And why? Think about this. When you read the Bible, it doesn't have that big of an emphasis on clothing. I mean, obviously, it's got emphasis on you got to wear modest apparel. Don't even say anything like that. I'm not talking about that. But think about John the Baptist. Why didn't he dress to impress? Or the disciples, or Paul. It says his bodily presence was weak. I doubt, he was coming in there just with great stuff on. What about the two witnesses in Revelation? They're clothed in sackcloth and ashes. Why all the overemphasis on a dress code? For example, I've heard not just insinuate, but really just judge how spiritual a person is by if they wear a tie to church or not. Maybe you've never heard that type of preaching, but that's a pretty common thing in certain places, where they say that a person should wear a tie to church, and they basically say you're sinning if you don't, is what they act like. And they say if you don't wear a tie, then you're going to make your brother to offend, or something along those lines. But let's just take off what you've heard for a minute, because there's nothing in the Bible about wearing a tie. Just think logically for a minute, and you'll see how strange this is. Now, when I first got saved, I heard that stuff, and I ate that stuff up about you got to wear a tie and all this stuff, and I thought that was the gospel. But then the more you sit down and you read the Bible, you kind of grow. You start thinking about this stuff, and you're like, what is that even? What is this? What are they saying? You're going to offend your brother if you don't have a colorful piece of cloth around your neck. That is very strange if you think about it. Why would you be concerned if I'm wearing a colorful piece of cloth around my neck? And it's really big with I've heard people say they will not listen to a preacher that doesn't have on a suit and tie. There's people that they would just get up and walk out if the pastor didn't have a suit and tie on. Think about that. He's mad because the guy doesn't have a colorful piece of cloth around his neck. Shouldn't you be more concerned with the message coming out of his mouth than what kind of outfit he's wearing? I mean, there's some people that there's this one guy told me, he said he will have any pastor as long as that man has only been married one time. And I just couldn't believe my ears when he said that. I didn't say nothing back. I just couldn't believe my ears. And think about this. There are people that they would rather listen to a pastor that's only been married once, who wears a suit and a tie, than to listen. And I mean, he could just teach anything, not even teach the Bible, just get up there and just say whatever. They'd rather listen to him as long as he's been married once and have on a tie, than a guy over here who maybe has been married more than once and doesn't have on a tie. Even though this guy may have the truth and he's really bringing something out from the Bible. you should judge things by what's coming out of his mouth. Is it the truth or is it not the truth? That's what we should be concerned about. And don't twist my words. Don't try to entangle me in my speech. Don't do the Pharisee stuff where you trying to find something in my words so you can entangle me in my speech. I'm not against ties. If you wear a tie, you wear a suit and a tie, I think you look great in it. Keep wearing it. If a guy wears one, great. I just think it's kind of strange, the overemphasis on it, and that you would think, and that I would have to worry about making my brother to offend by not having one on. I think that is strange, and I think it's a stretch. I don't think you can use the verse for that. I think that if I can use the verse you could throw anything in there. If you can say you got to wear a tie because you'll make your brother to offend if you don't, then you can really throw anything in there with that, because they're going to get offended about all kinds of stuff. You can't just pretend to know somebody's heart motive because they're wearing a tie or not wearing a tie. This guy said to me one time that he thinks that one of his favorite preachers is compromising because he saw him get up and didn't have a tie on. And I just can't understand that way of thinking. Wearing a tie is a preference and like a tradition thing. It has nothing to do with the Bible. I can't just take my own preferences and traditions and my own little personal way of doing things and say that you're not right with God if you don't do them. And I have all kinds of little preferences and traditions and things that I do that I feel a heavy burden to do, but I can't come at you and say you've got to do these things or you're not right with God, because that's what the Pharisees did. Bind heavy burdens which are grievous to be borne. And it's going to be, grievous to be borne for you, it's going to be hard for you to carry because it's not your burden. It's a burden that I have on myself. I can't do the things that you have a burden for necessarily, and you necessarily can't do the things I have a burden for. And if it's not in the Bible, I just can't just put that on you. That's just putting you in bondage. And to use the verse to say, well, I got to wear a tie because it's going to make my brother to offend, you're just becoming in bondage to that person and his tradition. And I believe that with my whole heart, what I just said. And if you can explain it to me better, why there's such a hang up on this, I would love to hear it, and I'll be open-minded about it. Because it's not wearing a tie or not wearing a tie is not a matter of your faith. It's not a Bible thing. So if you start applying what Paul said about not making your brother to offend to that, then, you could throw anything in there. What if I said, I think that guy has to wear a plaid shirt to church, and if he gets up in a suit and tie, I'm offended. Well, you say, well, that's crazy. A plaid shirt, that's pretty random. Well, what you're saying is pretty random if you think about it. You got to have a tie on, a colorful piece of cloth on. It's just really insane. So some guy in history, somewhere, I don't know where, I would love, if you've got information on this, I would love to know where, because I tried to look up some history on it. I couldn't find it. Who came up with the idea that you had to wear a suit and a tie going to church or while preaching? And ever since then, you have to wear it, or somebody's going to be offended about it. That's odd to me. Who invented that? Who came up with that? Why do we have to go by that? Who made that rule? And it's like, you're telling the younger generation that they're too easily offended and too sensitive, but you're offended if a man comes in without a colorful piece of cloth on his neck. To me, that's insane. It's not wrong to wear a tie. You look good in it. I think you got to keep wearing it, but I don't believe you have any right to tell a guy that he has to wear that. And think about it like this too. Now, this is going to make people even more mad. And it's about the Christmas tree thing going along with this. Every year around Christmas time, you got all kinds of people of the Bible-believing realm that get mad about Christmas trees. They say it's a bell bush. They say that you're doing pagan stuff. They go to Jeremiah 10 They say that's what they had they show you a Christmas tree there or whatever, and they get mad. They're all offended about the Christmas tree thing, and I'm not going into that. I'm just saying that to say this, to show how using I don't want to make my brother to offend is not a good argument, because for one thing, I'm not against Christmas trees. I could care less. They don't bother me one bit. They can't do good, they can't do evil. I mean, if you're worshiping it, that's wrong, but who is? Who's actually worshiping a tree? You know, you put it up and you really don't even think about it anymore after that. But what I'm trying to say is, you're saying that if these people are telling me that if I don't come to church with a tie on, I'm going to make my brother to offend, right? Well, they have Christmas trees in their church, which is cool. I think they look good. I think you ought to put them up. It's good decoration. I'm not saying you ought to put them up or not put them up. It's whatever you want to do. I could care less. But it's like, you'll put the Christmas tree up, and that's going to offend a whole bunch of people. How come is it that you don't care to offend them in some things, but then you care to offend them by not having a tie on? I think it's that's you see it as something that you need to do. And if you see it as something that you need to do, then do it. But that doesn't mean everybody else has to do it, because that's not scriptural to say you got to wear a certain thing like that. And, you know, they'll say a pastor has to wear a tie, and if he don't, then he's not respecting his office. I don't see that. He's not respecting his office because he doesn't have a colorful cloth around his neck. I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. When you really just sit down and think about it, how odd that is. That's odd. And it's respecting your office would be doing the things in 1 Timothy 3, trying to meet those qualifications and those characteristics. And nobody's going to meet those qualifications 100% of the time. And probably there's no pastor that's meeting any of them, meeting all of them 100% of the time. So but I would say that respecting your office is trying to be those things that Paul lays out. Not whether or not you got on a suit and tie. I think that's just religion. Trying to say that's respecting your office. You're making it about religious stuff. And, you know, you think about this, you know, you're only, you know, if you have church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and you wear a tie all 3 times, you're still a pastor when you're not in that building. And I wholeheartedly believe that a pastor's job is more than just the 3 or 4 hours that he preaches. You know, a lot of people think, well, he's lucky. He only has to work 3 hours a week. No, it's so much more than that. It's 7 days a week. You know, he could get a call and in the middle of the night and go to the hospital or I don't know about you, but I can put in 8 to 10 hours easy on one lesson, one measly little lesson of mine that's no good that I put on here. So I can't imagine how much time they're putting in a sermon. And, you know, that's a pastor of a church. So it goes much beyond the Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And you can be respecting your office every day and it don't make no matter what you're wearing. You know, I can't understand, you know, equating respecting your office with wearing a suit and a tie. It has nothing to do with it, in my opinion. That's my opinion. I think it's a religious thing. I think there's too much emphasis on clothes. I think that outside of telling somebody to wear modest apparel, you shouldn't show your body off. I shouldn't be showing my biceps off. I don't have no biceps, but I shouldn't be showing them off if I did have them. I shouldn't be going around trying to make other guys' wives look at me by wearing muscle shirts. And wearing tight pants and stuff. Not that anybody would want to see my legs in tight pants, but I mean, I shouldn't be wearing them. You know, women shouldn't show their chest off and all that stuff. But outside of that, who cares what you got on? Who cares if you come to church and in a button-up shirt and jeans? And you say, well, and I've said that to people, and I've been open. I've said that to not many people, but like very close people, like my family or something. And they'll say, well, you got to wear your Sunday best. You have to wear your Sunday best. And I'm like, well, I get it. But who's the one that came up with the idea for what the Sunday best is? What if, in my opinion, my Sunday best is jeans and a plaid shirt? What if I thought that looked better on me than a suit and a tie? Who said that? And who says, well, that's worldly? How is that any more worldly than a suit and a tie? I mean, Putin wears a suit and a tie. Biden wears a suit and a tie. I mean, some of the most evil men on the planet wear a suit and a tie. I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. Help me understand. I'm open-minded. I'll listen to it. I believe that you can be respecting church and your office with a polo shirt and jeans on. I honestly do. I just don't. I don't see the emphasis on clothes. And now, if I've not already made you hate me, this one right here may make you hate me. And once again, I think the reason I'm bringing this up, it goes back to respect of persons. People's having respect of persons because of what the clothes they got on. And then flashy titles. And you know that the Pharisees, they loved their flashy titles. They loved to be called of men, rabbi, rabbi. They loved it. And that's why I am so very confused with Bible believers and their need and insistence on the flashy titles. Now, I'm not against your flashy titles. If you want me to call you Dr. So-and-so, Pastor so-and-so, Reverend so-and-so, if you want me to call you Captain or Captain Planet or my hero or something, I'll do it. I have no problem with it. I don't understand the emphasis. I think that it's not so much your flashy titles that are wrong, it's the emphasis you put on it. For example, I've had people stop me in mid-sentence and say, like I was talking about something Ruckman said in a book or something, and they say, it's Dr. Ruckman. It's Dr. Ruckman. And I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. And I don't think you can compare this with good manners, like saying yes sir, yes ma'am. You know, I'm not against good manners. I'm not against you calling him Dr. Ruckman. I just think it's strange and pharisaical that I have to call someone doctor. And I believe that you can respect someone without calling them doctor. I mean, I try to put myself in the shoes of that person. And if I was some great scholar that had all this schooling or something, I don't want people calling me doctor. I would feel weird if you were calling me doctor. I'd be like, please call me by my first name. I'd feel a lot more comfortable being called by my first name. A lot of people don't even want you to call them ma'am or sir. At least where I live, they think it makes them feel old. People just want to be called by their first name. They're not going to think you're being disrespectful for saying their first name. There's really no need in the flashy titles. Just call people by their name. And I'm going to be honest with you. Don't get mad. If you feel like you have to have somebody say doctor your name or pastor your name, you got an ego problem. Because they were not being called that. Like they had the office of a pastor. They were an apostle. But it's like when Peter talked about Paul, he would just say beloved brother Paul or something. He didn't have to say Dr. Paul or anything like that. were they calling him Dr. Peter or something like that? But who was called doctor in the Bible? And this is why I'm so confused with it being Bible believers, is the people that were called doctor in the Bible was who? The scribes and the Pharisees. Luke 2:46, and it came to pass after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors. Who was in there? It was that religious crowd that hated him, that ended up hating him. In Luke 5:17, there were Pharisees and doctors of the law sitting by. In Acts 5:34, then stood there up one in the council, a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a doctor of the law, had in reputation among the people. So that Gamaliel guy, a doctor of the law, a Pharisee. It was the Pharisees that were called doctors, that they loved those flashy titles. And Bible believers, they know so much Bible, they know so much truth, but yet they'll say stuff like this where they put this huge emphasis on, you got to call him Dr. Ruckman. That is a respect of persons, because it's a respect of persons because you don't care if I call anybody else doctor. I can be talking about another guy I like. I mean, honestly, I like all kinds of preachers that you don't like. Another guy I like is James Knox. Now, I can say James Knox said this in his book, and you're not going to say it's Dr. James Knox. You know why? Because you don't like James Knox. Because he believes something a little different than what you believe, or because him and the Ruckman guys butted heads a little bit, you don't like Knox. So therefore, you don't say Dr. Knox, but you got to say Dr. Ruckman. That's respective persons. That's like. And it's like this, how much schooling does these guys have to have before I have to call them doctor? I mean, Knox has been at this since like the 70s, had schooling and stuff, and has his own school. How come you don't think I have to call him doctor? I can talk about David Hoffman and say, I love the Commons Reference Bible by David Hoffman. You don't say it's Dr. David Hoffman, because you don't like David Hoffman. Because him and some Ruckman guys butted heads. So therefore, in your mind, I don't have to call him doctor. Even though he's had a bunch of schooling and been a pastor for a while, you don't care what I call him. I could call him a bad name and you probably like it. Because you have respective persons. That's the problem. That's what the problem is. It's not calling Ruckman Dr. Ruckman. It's that you put a huge emphasis on it, and I don't have to call these other people Dr. Ruckman. You've put him on a pedestal, and it's more than just giving double honor. It is. And I'm not saying everybody does this. I'm just showing you that there's a lot of very just twisted stuff that goes on. But it's just all respective persons. Deep down, you think some people are better than others, and we all do that. I've done that before, where deep down I thought this person was better than this person. I remember when I first got saved and I started reading Ruckman stuff, and I thought that anybody that went to his school, PBI, was just on another level and knew so much more Bible than everybody else. And people have respective persons to people that went there. Isn't that strange? Like, what's with the big emphasis on the school? Like the Pharisees, the religious crowd, when they heard Jesus teach in the temple, they're like, how knoweth this man letters, having never learned? He had never went to their doctor of the law school, But it's just strange. A lot of this stuff is just strange, the way people think about this stuff. When you really sit down and think about it, it's strange. But I really don't know what else more to say. There's a lot of Pharisaical stuff going on in the Bible believing world, and it's just as there's just as much worldliness and messed up stuff in that than there is anything else. We talk about the Church of Christ and how They're more about defending their belief than they are about the soul of another person, and Bible believers many times are no different. They care more about defending their belief than they do about anything else many times. And my intentions was not to make anybody mad or hurt anybody's feelings. And please don't twist my words, because I didn't say anything against a lot of the stuff that I had in the last half that I mentioned, like the flashy titles and the wearing suit and tie. I think all that stuff's good. I'm just saying the overemphasis on it, I believe, is Pharisaical and strange. And it's like, I'm not trying to be critical. Please, it's like a lot of times people, to get out of being accountable for their actions, especially preachers I've noticed, so they don't have to be accountable for their actions, they'll say, well, this person's critical. This is somebody that can't sit under a pastor. I mean, I've been at the same church since I got saved, and I'm not a good church member. I'm a nobody there. And I've never said anything to anybody about anything that was going on. I'm not the type of person that thinks that everything that goes on has to be the way that I see it, and I just don't. So you're wrong. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying to keep you from being critical, because it saddens me to see these people that people look up to, because they believe that you are of God. They believe that you are giving them what God said. And for some people, their spiritual mentor or pastor or whoever is the closest thing to God to them at first. And they are eating up everything you say. And to me, it's a tragedy that you are up there making these people twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. It's like, I've noticed that that you can have an egomaniac guy teaching people, and then the people that learn from him, they're even more prideful and more of an egomaniac. They'll be so egomaniac and prideful because they learned it from him, they'll turn on him. And you saw that with the Anderson crowd. They turned on him, and I don't know that he has any pastor friends left, and they still teach just like him, they still act just like him, but they turned on him because he taught them to be that way. Like, you're teaching people, like you are in a position of teaching, and you are teaching them to be this jerk. And it's just a tragedy, because I see what you're saying, and I see them saying, amen, amen, just eating it up. And they're like, I'm thinking, are you agreeing with this prideful nonsense? All it is a bunch of prideful nonsense. You putting people down and putting yourself on this pedestal. And don't confuse this as thinking that I hate you or something. I don't hate you. I am mad. I be honest with you, I am mad about it. I'm mad about things that I see that are going on, but I don't hate you. And I'd hope that you can see where you're wrong on this, because I personally believe you're wrong on it. And humble yourself. Quit thinking of yourself more highly than you ought to think, and realize that that it's the Lord. It's only Him. That's the only reason you got strength. And get some mercy, get some humbleness, get some kindness, some love. All them ooey gooey words that you don't like, even though they're in the Bible a whole bunch. But I'll go ahead and stop there. I went a little bit longer than I wanted to.